Welcome to Leading the Next Generation with Tim Elmore. I am your co-host, Andrew McPeak, and our mission here at Growing Leaders is to empower the emerging generations with skills to lead in real life. And Tim, today we're talking about this really important characteristic, life skill, if you will, of commitment. And we've got a kind of a fun way we like to talk about commitment here, and I wondered if you might kick us off that way.
Yeah, sure. So in the very first Habitudes course, one of our Habitude images is simply called the half-hearted mountain climber.
Yes.
Now, you all listening know there is no such thing as a half-hearted mountain climber. You're either a mountain climber or you're half-hearted, but they don't usually go together. So it's based on a real live place in the Swiss Alps. For decades, there was a resort in the Swiss Alps that caters to groups who want to ascend the beautiful mountain, oftentimes first-time climbers.
Yeah.
So they're not, really experienced, but hey, let's do this together. The fun will be we're doing it together. So about halfway up this mountain, there's a restaurant, but it's sort of a halfway house because it's halfway up.
Yeah.
And in this little halfway house, there are beautiful glass walls, a fireplace, hot chocolate, hot coffee.
Yeah.
Because, you're going to be probably cold halfway up the mountain.
Yeah.
And what typically happens is such a picture of commitment today. So let's say a group is ascending the mountain. Let's say the group decides, hey, let's stop and get some hot chocolate. Perfect. They all go in. They all get their hot chocolate. Okay, time to get back out there now. Well, part of the group goes back out and says, all right, let's finish. And the other group goes, it's pretty cozy in here.
It's nice.
It's nice in here. I love this hot chocolate. And the whipped cream is to die for, And so about half the group stays back. Well, at first, they're glad about that decision because they're going, man, I'm cozy and nice. Fred's probably freezing to death up there,
Yeah.
But after a while, everybody that chose the cozy option now is wondering, well, what's it like? And they start looking out the window, and suddenly they see their team that they're not on anymore coming back down, smiling from ear to ear. They did it. They ascended the mountain. They made the peak. But, this group in here just has an empty mug that was once full of hot chocolate.
Yeah.
The whole point is we often stop halfway in our commitments, and today more so than ever. Not just kids, all of us. It's interesting, Andrew, in that chapter of the Habitude book, remember we talk about the root meaning of mediocre.
Yes.
Think about the word mediocre. Think about the letters, mediocre. It literally originally meant middle of the rock. It was a mountain climbing term that meant mediocre or average is I made it halfway up the mountain.
I tried and didn't finish.
That's right. And so many times that's where we are today with our lives. So in fact, let's not pick on the kids yet. Let's talk about us for just a minute. I think as options go up, commitment tends to drop because there's so many opportunities I have to do different things. So many marriages don't finish.
Yeah.
We thought we were going to finish, but we didn't.
Yep.
A membership to a club, a college degree, that diploma, a job, a partnership, so many things we would say it's now the norm to start but not finish. And so, Andrew, as you just said, in today's podcast, we're not just talking about commitment. We're talking about how is it that we can draw commitment from a new generation and it sticks. It's not going to be easy, and we're going to have to make some changes to get that done.
Absolutely. Well, we know that commitment is essential for success in life for all the reasons that you just pointed out, right? We're not just talking about do we have the ability to make a New Year's resolution and follow through it all year long. This is life stuff, right? Am I going to stick it through this degree that I'm halfway through at this point? Am I going to stick it through this relationship that I'm halfway through? And I think the caliber of success in today's world, if we're being honest, is sometimes defined by simply the people who are willing to finish what they started.
That's right.
It actually is so rare today that it often the person who sticks out the most is simply the one who was able to finish.
That's right. Yeah, they weren't necessarily more talented, higher IQ, more gifted. They were the people that just stayed in it. It's interesting, Andrew. I remember distinctly, this just came to me, talking with my kids when they were still in the house. They're adults now. But having a talk about commitment, because I was noticing they were wanting, I think it was Jonathan wanted to quit the soccer team early and, that sort of thing. And that wouldn't have been the end of the world.
Nope.
But my wife and I had if you start a season, you don't have to like it, but you're going to finish the season. You don't have to go back next season. You don't have to play soccer anymore the rest of your life. But finish what you start. And it was actually a good life story. So here's what I concluded, and here's what I shared with my kids at the time. They were 5th grade and 9th grade, okay? I remember saying, here's why commitment's hard. Change is normal. So you're all going to think, I'm bored now. I want to change. And wouldn't you agree? You grew up in a generation where subject to change was one of the most normal phrases you heard. So change is normal. Life is more convenient. And I think when life becomes more convenient, I'll just speak for me, it's harder for me to stick to a commitment that's no longer glitzy or glamorous. There's no more goosebumps. And then lastly, as I just mentioned, options are greater. So because there's so many options out there, I have FOMO. The grass looks greener. So because of those, subject to change is how we live our lives. There's a better option out there. And I just think we're going to have to find a way to equip the next generation to do better than we did, who didn't finish perhaps a commitment or a marriage or a club, whatever, and say, you can do this even when you're not feeling it anymore.
Absolutely. Well, in preparation for this, we were talking about, really several examples of this down through history, but there've been a number of famous ones, and I wonder if you could share one of those with us. It's the story of a little known, not little known today, but it was little known when it started, competition between two companies that ended up sparking or being a really excellent example of what happens when we don't finish on our commitments and make the most of our opportunities.
Yeah. So most of you know the name Reed Hastings. Reed was the guy who sold his tech company, celebrated it with his wife, rented a movie at Blockbuster Video. We all remember those days, don't we? And he ended up losing the video cassette. And when they finally found it, long after it was due, he returned it to the library, the old library. And, of course, he owed a big fine. Well, he tried to negotiate it, but he had to pay the fine. And he said, my two big thoughts driving away were, how do I tell my wife we owe this much money? And secondly, there's got to be a better way to do home entertainment. And Reed Hastings, of course, is the one that came up with the idea of Netflix. Now, that's the story everybody knows. The story that some may not know is that Reed actually took that idea early on to Blockbuster Video, to corporate, and said, this is the future. Netflix is short for internet films or movies. We're going to be able to stream these things. And at first we may mail these, DVDs out, but eventually, and Blockbuster just didn't see it. And instead of staying committed to home entertainment, they were committed to a methodology that just was antiquated. And Andrew, I know you've heard me say this. You may have said it too, but I just wonder if we're approaching a Netflix generation, Gen Z, with a Blockbuster style of leadership and commitment sometimes. We're saying, well, you're obligated to stay. You signed up. Well, that just doesn't. That may be true. And duty is a great thing. But I'm saying I'm finding most of Gen Z going, what duty? What obligation? I've got something else that is going to bear more fruit or be more fun. So,
in other words, the lack of commitment that we're seeing in today's generation may be as much a result of the way we're leading them as it is any necessarily innate characteristic that we might be seeing.
I think so.
They're a product of the world they're growing up in so many ways.
So I'll give you a quick example of exactly what we're talking about. Two leaders, staff members of university clubs. Universities almost always have dozens and dozens and dozens of campus-led organizations. But they spoke to me earlier this month about the challenges they face with their organizations, and most of them surrounded this issue. We recruit people, students, and they stay a little while, and then, they fizzle. So at first they sizzle, and then they fizzle, basically is what happened. They couldn't seem to keep committed members, and they were frustrated. And they were asking me as a growing leaders team member here, how do you keep them? How do you do this? And so what we're about to talk about, Andrew, is our response to people like that. If you're having trouble keeping committed students, maybe this will be just a conversation for you.
Absolutely. The goal cannot just be we yell at these kids. Why aren't you guys committed, right? It has to be in the way that we're leading, because I really think you're onto something here. There's a style of leadership that not only encourages students to follow through on their commitments, but I think it might almost inevitably lead to it.
Yeah.
I really think. So
Yeah.
walk us through it.
Okay, so let me start by saying the obvious. I think we, the older generations, maybe that's Gen X and baby boomers, are approaching recruitment and commitment in a way that is not appealing to the millennials and to Gen Z.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to make one big divide. I know people have different personalities, and some are committed and they're 15.
Yep.
And some are not committed and they're 65. but by and large, we're using an approach that just isn't working.
Yeah.
So our outdated sequence of priorities, I think, tells the story. So let me just lay this out, listeners. So I am a baby boomer. I grew up, in the 60s and 70s. That was my childhood. And so what worked back then, what was used on me, was this. Three steps to make a commitment. One, an organization might say, believe what we believe.
Yeah.
So if you're going to, quote unquote, join us.
You're changing to fit us.
That's right. Yeah. In other words, embrace our mission and our core principles. You better learn them so you know what you're signing up for. So clubs did this on campus. A church might give the right hand of Christian fellowship or something like that. Something would happen. Membership is transferred.
Yep.
But it was you're joining after you believe what we believe.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Still makes sense to us.
Yeah.
Number two, behave like we behave.
Yeah.
So next, we want them to begin looking and acting like we do.
Yep.
And how many clubs, here's a uniform, here's
Yep.
a tie, here's a pen, wear this pen.
Yep.
And again, I'm not against that. I'm just saying that's old school thought. Mm-hmm. And then finally belong to our group.
Yeah.
So, and that once they implement these first two, then we allow them to officially join. Now they actually get the pen. So
Yep.
believe what we believe, behave like we behave, and then belong to our group. And I believe, this is just me, I believe the fact is today's students may just see the issues in the opposite order.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a pregnant pause there for listeners to underscore what I just said. The opposite order. We offer programs, but what they want and need are deep, trusting relationships. Before I ever sign up for a program, I don't think I need another program, Bob. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Generation Z has been programmed to death. I really believe that. And I'd love to hear from you because you're 30 years younger than I am. But I just feel like we've so prided ourselves in putting together this package, this program, and they're going, yeah, I can get that on Netflix or I can get that somewhere else. And it's actually better than yours,
Yeah.
oftentimes. So they have a sports program thrown at them. They have YouTube and Amazon programs targeted at them. They have TV programs to watch. What they don't experience is rich relationships and community, which I think their heart of hearts, what they're longing for. So whether you're leading a classroom that they need to belong to,
Yeah.
not just have to go to, maybe it's a club on campus. Maybe it's an athletic team. Maybe you're an employer of young team members and you say, you belong here. I pay you on Friday. Do something. Pretend like they're volunteers and then say, what would I do to win them over?
Yeah. Well, this is such good insight. I was actually having dinner with a friend of mine just last night, and we were talking about this exact thing. The feeling that we had even growing up, of feeling like not only is this true, right? You've got to believe what we believe, and then you've got to look like how we look and dress and act and all those things, and then you'll belong. But often I think many millennial generations, like I'll speak for mine, would walk out of that feeling like not only did we have to conform to this thing, but also the expectations that were set about how we'd feel belonging at the end of that sometimes didn't even show up, right?
Yeah.
So I put in all this work. I worked really hard to look like everybody else, and yet I don't feel like I belong. And so not only was the relationship prioritized last, but sometimes it never even showed up.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the Generation Z is watching this and going, how do I know I can even trust you? That if I do all of that stuff, that I'm going to end up there. So you're exactly right. I think they long for that relationship, and they don't want to promise that it's going to show up at the end of a whole bunch of work. They want to see it up front.
No doubt. And of course, research psychologist Brene Brown would say, what we're really asking them to do is fit in, not belong.
Yes.
Remember how she differentiates between the two.
Yeah.
Fitting in is what a boomer often wants. Just look like we look and say what we say. And again, it worked in our head because it worked 30 years ago or so. And they're going, I don't want to just fit in. I'd like to be myself and belong and play the cards I have in my hand. So, Andrew, maybe this is an obvious statement, but inclusivity has taken on new meaning today.
I agree.
Everyone wants to belong to a tribe, whatever that tribe is, sports tribe, whatever. Um, but unlike past generations, tribes may not center around a set of beliefs or behaviors. There's a lot of things that Gen Z belongs to. Just look at their phone. Look at all the apps. They belong to something. And it may have nothing to do with I believe exactly like you believe, or this talk like you talk, or whatever. So they often see older generations pushing for behavior modification and cramming a set of beliefs down their throat to make sure everybody looks right. And I think we spend loads of time trying to get students to think like we think, when that may never completely happen.
Yeah.
And maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have just a few minutes, but I want to dive in, Andrew, if it's okay with you.
Let's do it.
To talk about shifting this set of three.
Absolutely.
So instead of, believe what we believe, behave like we behave, and then belong, what if we admitted the fact that we need to lead differently because they want to belong before they believe? So students don't necessarily make decisions based on logic or data. I don't think I did when I was 17 years old.
Yeah, that's nothing new.
Yeah, that's true. I enjoyed that way too much. I know professors, salespeople, staff, and campus ministers, for instance, who've made the same mistake. They try to convince a young person about something before they build any sense of relationship, trust, or community. And students today would rather join a small affinity group and belong to this group even before they embrace the beliefs of the group. Mm-hmm. They'll figure that out as they go.
Yeah.
I watch my daughter in this same thing. And I realize, she wants to connect and then figure out what she believes. And do I like it? No, I still don't. But I know this is, if I have any hope of continuing to be a voice in her life, I've got to understand this. So their basis for making decisions is more relational than logical. I'm saying that. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like maybe that might be, I'm not saying it's illogical, but maybe relationship comes first?
Yeah, I think relationship is a higher value because of our generation growing up at a time where relationships are harder to come by, right?
Yeah.
They're not automatic.
Scarcity.
And even when you have them, even when you have them, they're often digital and not quite as weighty. This is one of the reasons, Andrew's hypothesis here, one of the reasons I think our generation is leaning towards some of the things that are a little bit more physical. We're going back to buying vinyl records. We're going back to spending more time in person. And some of those things I think are seeing a resurgence because of the value of relationships has increased because of scarcity, as you said.
Yeah. I was interested in the fact that the last time I read the latest Barna Research Group, they said that Generation Z students, these would be teenagers, I think, in this study, no longer, the majority no longer trusts the institutions of our land.
Yep.
So corporate America, government, even education, healthcare. So the institutions, not so much trust in.
Yep.
But they do trust an older generation person with whom they have a relationship.
Absolutely.
So my grandpa, I'll listen to, even though he might run that institution that I don't like.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So this is really helpful, listeners. For me, anyway. Their focus may be more social than rational in your head.
Yep.
But for them, it's very rational. Once I know you and I feel like I can trust you, I'll let you take my hand and walk me across this bridge that I wouldn't have crossed it without you.
Absolutely.
So author and research professor Brene Brown, I mentioned her earlier, talks about the difference between fitting and belonging. I think we need to stop pushing the fit-in thing.
Yep.
Where it's almost a uniform, and sometimes it is a uniform.
Quite literally, yes.
Yeah, quite literally, and allow people to be individuals and then belong. So I love what author James Clear says about this. He explains the difficulty of this reality, and I quote, "Convincing someone to change their mind is really the process of convincing someone to change their tribe because of these realities we're talking about." He goes on, "If they abandon their beliefs, they run the risk of losing social ties."
It's true. Yeah.
Haven't we seen this?
Yeah.
You can't expect someone to change their mind if you take away their community too.
Yes.
That's powerful. You have to give them somewhere to go. Nobody wants their worldview torn apart if loneliness is the outcome.
Wow.
So if you're wanting them to do anything, take a class, do well in a class, join an athletic team and stay committed the whole season, join a club, join a religious group, whatever. We better make sure that belonging thing is intact because those ties will need to be in place as we help shape this is what we think here.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of adults are focused on, I'd really like for my kid to stop doing fill in the blank. Whether it's, I wish they'd stop hanging out with those kids. I wish they'd stop showing up to that thing that they always go to. I wish they'd stop, hanging out there on Friday nights. But this is actually even speaking to that, right?
Yeah.
If getting them to stop doing that is telling them they have to lose those relationships, that relational connection or that relational tie. I think the way you even pull some kid away from something is to give them something else more meaningful to belong to, right?
No doubt.
So it's a replacement of that, so that there's not saying, oh, I've got to walk away and be lonely now, from that. So I love that quote. It's so insightful.
It really is. So how do we do this? We have just a few minutes, and I really want to press in on how does this happen. Well, the first thing I need to say, and if you're taking notes, write this down. It isn't easy.
Yeah.
This is not going to be 3 easy steps to get commitment out of students. Even in our organization, we have adult full-time staff. Nobody's a student. Our interns are students, but everybody else is in their careers.
Yeah.
But we've experienced with 4 generations here a little bit different view on inclusivity and belonging. And I'm learning, Andrew. So we have new team members who want to belong, but bring maybe a different set of priorities than past team members. And I believe the key is for leaders to fully embrace the DNA of the organization. So we need to know who we are.
Yep.
And haven't we had conversations? Let's not forget who we are.
Identity, yeah.
That's right, identity. And we look at that wall where we have our mission and values and vision every single week for all of us, old and young.
Yeah.
And that's important. So we need to determine what's core. Guiding principles then become key for the team. But then after that, I believe that groups, and hopefully listeners, any group has an application for this, need layers of commitment.
Yes.
Where you can put your toe, if I can use this term, put your toe in the water before you jump in the deep end. Mm-hmm. We've said, either you're in or you're out. Jump into the deep end of the pool. And they're going, I don't even have floaties yet. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but if we could have, like some pools or beaches have, this, let me put my toe in the water, just kind of ease in. Well, they're not committed. You're right. They're not committed yet.
Yep. See if we like it here is what I was going to say.
Exactly. But I think what we need to do that we haven't done well is when that toe's in the water, create a sense of belonging. Now, it may not be heavy duty, and I'm not saying you give them money or something like that, but there's a sense of belonging at that little shallow level, shallow into the pool.
Yeah.
And then they start getting deeper and deeper, and we always ask for deep commitment. Well, think about the deep end of the pool. Your toes don't touch the bottom. Mm-hmm. You better know how to swim. And the swim is the commitment thing. So we've got to teach them to swim by providing maybe a good figure is concentric circles.
Yes.
We've talked about these before. Yep. So you know what concentric circles are, listeners. Okay, it's like a bullseye. There's an outer layer, another layer, and finally the inner circle. What if you provided steps of commitment for them to walk inward to get to the bullseye of full-on commitment?
Yeah.
Full-on commitment. And it would be silly for me to ask a brand new team. We just hired 3 new team members.
Yeah.
Mimi and Lauren and Molly. For me to ask the same that I ask of you.
Yeah.
Or you ask of me.
Yeah.
Now, are they part of the team? You bet they are. But they're in the shallow end.
We're not going to walk up to them and go, give your life to this,
Exactly. Yeah. And yet we want to. I want to.
Yeah.
And then I question the commit. It's just silly. I just realized. So listeners, I'm trying to maybe outline for you at least a diagram in your head of various layers of opportunities for commitment is really what we're talking about, these concentric circles.
Absolutely.
So same DNA, just a little bit different look as they come in. So one last thought, and then I know we need to wrap up. Andrew, you may want to say a couple of things because I have monopolized this conversation.
It's all good.
I think that we need to remember the DNA is alike, but they may be cousins, not twins. I like that phrase. You've heard me say that before. Twins or especially identical twins. Oh my gosh, which one's
exactly
which?
The same.
You got the freckles, but you got a different set, whatever. Cousins are same family, but I don't expect Todd to look like Susan or whatever, So maybe that's what we're saying. Would you allow for cousins to be in that organization, even if they're not twins?
Yeah, I love that. The concentric circle idea is so great because I think using another component I've even heard from you before is as they move closer and closer into the organization, which is a greater and greater commitment level, it also needs to be self-selection, right? They're choosing that and then also making some sort of statement,
Yes.
really, of selecting that. And you've talked about that and how you structure leadership programs
Yeah.
that sort of invite them closer and closer. And I think that's important too.
And if I can get back to the original thought about community and relationships, the belong, I believe as commitment deepens, relationship and intimacy deepen. And I mean in a
Yeah.
healthy way. But, you know, you're at a whole nother level after years and years and years of being here. Well, of course, you know.
Yeah, makes sense.
So leaders, if you're asking that sophomore as they become a junior to step deeper, make sure your relationship with them is also deepening.
ready to
it's
handle
not
that, yeah.
superficial like it was their freshman year.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's important.
That's so good. That's so good. I love this. It takes me back to that statement you made at the beginning, right? It's we have a blockbuster style of leadership in a Netflix world, and I think this is speaking so well to for a lot of people listening. This may be like, I cannot believe what they're asking me to do. This is radical. This is weird. This is different. It feels like we're changing too much, but I really think what we're doing is we're recognizing the times we're in and going, commitment just looks different today.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Well, you talked about when we were getting ready for this, a young man that you led for years earlier in your career named Michael, and how you sort of walked him through and learned this process with him. Do you want to walk through that?
Yeah, I'll do it briefly, but Michael's a great example of everything we're talking about. So he was a student who came to our department that I led, and Michael had some, the best way to describe it without going into detail, some unhealthy lifestyle choices going on. But what's ironic is, even though he was kind of just everywhere with his lifestyle choices, he wanted to be highly involved and become a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I both believe leadership means sacrifice.
Yeah.
But the moment I immediately say, well, Michael, you need to make some sacrifice. You're going to be a leader. You got to be committed here, and here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter was he didn't want to give up some of the lifestyle choices he was making. So instead of condemning him or saying, well, get away until you come back committed, I learned myself to create some shallow into the pool, concentric
Dip your toe
circles,
in the water.
yeah, that sort of thing. So because he expressed a desire to be involved and to lead, I kept calling him back to that. You still want to be? Yeah, I do. Okay. Because you said that to me.
Yep.
And I would point out some very doable decisions he would need to make, and some of them sacrificial. Because I really do believe that leadership means giving up your rights, not gaining rights. It's not about power, but empowerment.
Yes.
So I began to be a teacher in a sense of leadership may look different than you thought. It's not about, just a badge and some power. Well, I watched Michael walk through these concentric circles beautifully. And I watched him. I get teary because I remember him very well making some decisions that I knew were hard for him, but he said, I want this more than I want those things
Love it.
that I had in my past. And, life is trade-offs, isn't it?
It is.
And he ended up being one of our top-level leaders in the department. He made the decision to give up in order to grow up and go up.
Yeah.
To be cheesy
I was
there.
about to say, that's a very Timmis thing to say there.
Yeah. Well, and John Maxwell said give up to go up first. So, but the point is, maybe the sacrifice thing is still good. We just need to get to it differently.
Yeah, invite them into a process and celebrate them all along the way,
right.
which is what you did. Well, Tim, thank you so much for challenging us in this. This is high-level leadership stuff, and it's such a perfect example of what leading the next generation looks like. It's just a little bit different today. So thank you so much for your wisdom and diving in on this subject. Well, commitment is a life skill, one that today's students need just as much as any past generation needed. And if you're looking for ways to teach life skills, just like commitment, actually, commitment is one of the life skills we teach in our Habitudes for Social and Emotional Learning program. So if you're looking for a curriculum or a program or even just a book to put in the hands of a student and you really want to teach them about commitment, we've got really great resources for you. They're not the only resources out there, but we really believe in them. Habitudes simply uses images to communicate and help develop students' habits and attitudes. And we believe that's the correct path to be able to shape their life. So if you'd be interested in finding out more about that, head on over to growingleaders.com/SEL, and you can find out all about our Habitudes for Social and Emotional Learning program, which we have for both middle school and high school groups. As always, if you would rate this podcast, give us 5 stars. That gets the word out about what we're doing. Or you might want to quite literally get the word out by passing this episode along to somebody who you think might find it helpful. We would love for you to do that. If you want to connect with us on social media, we are at Growing Leaders and at Tim Elmore. We love connecting with you on there. And then finally, if you have ideas for this podcast, people you want us to interview, topics you think we should cover, shoot us an email. It's podcast@growingleaders.com. We love getting those. Tim, thank you so much again for leading us. Go out and develop those students to make long-term commitments today. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.